Bonjour les amis. Welcome to the Musée Balzac at the château de Saché. We are in the Touraine region and I am going to take you on a tour of this chateau, originally built in the Middle Ages to protect the area and then of course restored over the centuries, turned into a very nice place. The museum opened in the 1950s. It is dedicated to a famous guest in this house, Honoré de Balzac. Here he is. You may remember he was born in Tours, and the Touraine, the city of Tours, the Touraine, are very much present in his work. He stayed with friends here. He was invited, or he invited himself, and had a room on the second floor. This is the entryway. The museum has been restored in the 19th century style, even if some of the furniture is much older, but just to recreate what it would have been like when Balzac was a guest here. He came often once he moved to Paris with his family from the 1830s to the 1850s. He died in 1850 and he came here a couple of times a year to visit his friends, but mostly to recoup or recover, to relax, and to work. He was an incredible worker. Spent hours and hours at his desk here in Paris, wherever he was, writing one of the books, the many stories. So some of the furniture, like I said, is 19th century, some of it is older. This is the dining room. So you can picture what an affluent family in the 19th century would have done or how they would have lived. Look at this. This is from Eastern France. It's earthenware. Beautiful. The wallpaper, everything is immaculate. Very elegant interior. Neoclassical inspiration in many ways. So I'll tell you a little bit more about Balzac as we go through some of the rooms. So there are 2 floors in the museum, and we are now on the top floor. Lot of light at the château de Saché, and we are surrounded with incredible scenery. The Touraine is here, rolling hills, woods, a big river, the Indre. Back in the vestibule, the entrance on this floor. Look at the wallpaper. This is Napoleon over there. Balzac was a fan. Napoleon's here. And do you recognize this gentleman? This is Louis-Philippe, the king of the French, the last king France ever had, from 1830 to 1848. Listen to this. I am alone here, one of the perks of visiting in the winter. Le salon, one of the rooms where the host would welcome guests or just entertain himself. They would play cards or with die as well, converse, sip some tea or coffee. One of the incredible things in this room is the wallpaper that imitates drapes. Look at this. So Balzac loved to read his books here to his hosts. He played games as well when he wasn't working. Now, during World War II, the chateau was requisitioned by the French authorities when the Germans arrived in 1940. And they stayed here for a short while, and then eventually the Germans occupied it. And a lot of the furniture was lost at that time, And it was a lot of work when the museum opened in the 50s to find furniture that would resemble the type of decor that the owner had. And from wherever you look, the windows, you see the beautiful scenery of the Touraine that inspired Balzac so much. Several of his books, like Lily and the Valley, for example, are based in this area. He never forgot where he was from, and this is the place where, as I said earlier, he found peace. You know, he owed a lot of money, so in Paris his life was a little crazy. He wasn't in very good health, and so the fresh air here did him a lot of good. So this was Le Grand Salon, and the visit continues. Actually, I made a mistake earlier. I said we were on the second floor. This is the first floor. I'm sorry. I didn't have much time to prepare this visit. I just did it once, and then I'm taking you through it because I know the cell signal is too low, too weak to do a live stream here. So, my dear patrons, you will be enjoying this visit at the château de Saché. The second floor is very interesting. Now you've heard of La Comédie Humaine, this incredible body of work representing I forgot how many books that Balzac started working on, as you can see the date here, in the 1820s, worked on throughout his life. Most of his famous characters and stories were part of La Comédie Humaine, incredible body of work which he never completed. In fact, here's a list of the different stories. If it's italics, then it means he never wrote them. So you can see the themes. The first one here says Scène de la vie privée, private life. Scène de la vie de province, scenes from life outside Paris. Scène de la vie parisienne, scenes of Parisian life. Scène de la vie politique, political life. Scène de la vie militaire, military life, Les Chouans, this wonderful story about Brittany that takes place in the Vendée, and not in Brittany, in the Vendée is part of that. Scène de la vie de campagne, life in the countryside. And then he would have gone on to philosophical studies and more. So whenever you see italics, it means he didn't complete the book, but there's a lot of books still. So this section of the museum is dedicated to recreating some of these characters, as well as the environment that he described in some of his books, his novels. This is a cabinet de travail et le boudoir, so kind of a juxtaposition in this section between the public space. This is what an attorney's office might have looked like, une étude de notaire in the 19th century, and that's mentioned in several stories by Balzac. So this is the public space, professional life. And then next to it, they recreated, look at this is incredible. Next to it, they recreated a boudoir, very important part of an apartment where the lady of the house would maybe greet special guests. And the boudoir is a little bit like a theater stage. See the use of very richly decorated fabrics and those curtains. So it's very intimate, it's very cozy. Nobody's supposed to know what's going on in there, the private conversations. So again, the public space versus the private space in this section. Gentleman looking very serious here is Maître Jean-Baptiste Guillonnet-Merville, so a lawyer. Each room has very handy descriptions in several languages that you can see here, and they detail the furniture, the decor, and they explain why they did such and such. What's this one? La Touraine dans l'œuvre de Balzac. So this is how important Tours, his native city, and the Touraine, this region, were to him. He was inspired by a lot of what I see every day. For example, here, Le Vieux Tours, which was unchanged at the time from the Middle Ages to the 19th century when he lived. It hadn't been renovated yet, and Balzac was really inspired by it. La Loire, the Loire River, of course. And then at the back of this room is an incredible library, which my understanding is that it includes a collection, a very rich collection of his early works, original editions of his works, and all these books were written by Honoré de Balzac. So that's pretty incredible. And it's been donated to the museum. These are three small busts that represent Balzac at different stages of his life. And some of the characters he created, like this gentleman, l'Abbé Birotteau, in the famous Abbé de Tours, which was one of the stories. Got to be careful where you step because they have alarm systems behind these ropes here, so I don't want to trip. Look at this fireplace. Now remember, this chateau originally was built in the Middle Ages, and like many in the Loire Valley, a lot of work was done after the 100 Years' War, during the Renaissance, late 15th, early 16th century, and then through the rest of the centuries as well. So it's in very good shape. Let's see, maybe I'll go this way. La Chambre de Balzac. So I told you he had a room on the second floor when he visited his friends here, the family. This would have been le cabinet de toilette, so your bathroom, right? There was no bathtub, as you can see. There's a bidet there on the right-hand side in the wooden piece of furniture. This is where you would bathe and clean yourself. In fact, this room with its very distinctive window was mentioned in one of his novels. So they know this is the room that inspired it. The grounds are out there and they're beautiful as well. This is his bedroom, the actual bedroom that Balzac stayed in for about 20 years whenever he came here to the château de Saché. Now these, if you know the story of Balzac, this is a coffee grinder, this is a coffee pot. And the reason he could work for hours, even though he was not in very good health, hours and hours every day from 5 a.m. all the way to dinner time, was thanks to coffee. He drank gallons of it. And I don't know if you know this, but Balzac died pretty young. He was in his early 50s. So this is an example of what he would have done and how he meticulously corrected everything. You can see. This is how he arrived with his things. He would have used a coach from Tours to get here, and his things would be in a trunk like this one. And here's his bed. Watching for the alarm system here. This is the little bed where he would sleep. I read on the sign earlier that the bed and the furniture around it have been dated back to the 18th century. So these are really valuable pieces of furniture. He was a big guy. He wasn't very tall, but he was very heavy set, kind of muscular. So this is not a very big bed for such a big man. And so you see how small the room is, but he loved it here because it was peaceful. And they let him do his thing. So they would call him for dinner, but he may or may not show up. And his host just let him do whatever he needed to do. He would spend some time with them in the salon we saw downstairs, the drawing room, but when he needed to work, they would just let him work. That's why he loved coming here. We have one more room here to illustrate the world of Balzac. This is a priest room, and it might surprise you because it's really richly decorated. And Balzac featured several famous priests, or priests who became famous thanks to his books in some of his work. But I found out that it wasn't that unusual for a priest to enjoy such nice accommodation, because a lot of these would be donated by affluent women who were very devout, and when they liked a specific priest, they would often gift him with furniture and other objects. I think we have a couple more guests coming, so I'll try and be quiet. So this is the second floor. This room is very interesting as well, because it says Balzac en son monde, Balzac and his world. Now, he had a lot of love affairs and was madly in love with a woman who was from Poland. She was the last woman in his life. I'll show her to you in a minute. This was his mother on the left and his father on the right. He was born in Tours, and they lived in Tours until he was 16 years old. And then they moved on to Paris, but he always came back. Oh, and I think this was his sister, Laure, his sister. So Mrs. Hanska, who was his mistress for a long time, she was married, was one of his great loves, and he wrote many letters to her. And there she is in this portrait here. This was her daughter on the right and her new husband. And they traveled together with Balzac, and he got along with them very well. Look at this view from this window. It's impressive. The beautiful Touraine skies on a fairly cold January day. You see the rolling hills, the fields, the woods, and the property, the grounds. In the summer, they have lounge chairs outside, and people can just come, read a book, relax. Look at this piano. I don't know if you play the piano, but that's quite spectacular. So this second floor is really dedicated to recreating the stories of Balzac, the characters, and also the world he lived in. They talk also about Balzac and Flaubert, Gustave Flaubert, who lived at the same time. It was a bit of a competition between them, but Flaubert was most impressed with Balzac's ability to work, the incredible amount of work he was able to do. So before I fall down the stairs, I will hang on to this for a second, because now I need to take you to the last floor, which is actually below ground. And it is also a very interesting section of the museum. It took me almost 2 hours to take a look at everything. So plan for a couple of hours when you come here if you're going to look at all the details. This is where we entered. This was the first floor, first European floor. When we entered, and the dining room is over there, as you recall. More stairs to go back. And when you arrive, you go through the boutique, which is also the place where you get your tickets, €6 to get in, very affordable. And this is also where you exit. I'm trying not to fall. We're almost there. Bear with me. This door is barred. Look at that. This is an emergency exit. All right, so it says, poussez la barre pour ouvrir. Push the bar to open, and here we go. So the boutique is on the left, but before we go there, we have a couple more rooms to see. This is the salle de l'imprimerie, the printing room. Now, I don't know if you realize this or not, but Balzac did work as a printer for a while in Paris. He wasn't very good at it. He ran a printing business, but ran it into the ground. He spent too much money. But printing was such an important part of his life. He had a very close connection with his editors, his publishers, and the printing shops he worked with. One of them is famous in Tours, the Mame family, M-A-M-E. And at that time in the 19th century, there was a ferocious appetite for reading. And so printing shops were a big thing. Look at these machines. It's a beautiful day. It's really sunny but cold. And we are in a spectacular room. You can see the walls with that tuffeau stone. And look at this fireplace. One more press here. So now let's go see the last part of the museum. Now, I don't know if you remember when we were in the 14th arrondissement recently, a couple trips ago maybe, when I went back to Paris, I took you to le Carrefour Vavin, V-A-V-I-N, which is in Montparnasse, right where the big cafes are. And I showed you that statue of Balzac by Rodin, which was quite a controversial statue at the time. And when you stand outside, when you look at it at that intersection, busy intersection in Montparnasse, this is what you see, the statue that doesn't really look like Balzac. And it was controversial, so those who commissioned it eventually didn't want Rodin to put it out there, and they asked another sculptor to do it. But eventually, after Rodin's death, the statue was rehabilitated and is now considered a masterpiece. Anyway, in this room, in this beautiful room, I should say, we have a very interesting study of all the sculptors who have worked on creating statues or busts of Honoré de Balzac, mostly after his death, but some of them before his death as well. So it's called, you see, Monuments in Tribute to Balzac. These two are very special to me because they used to be on La Rue Nationale in Tours, right outside his house. And the house burned down in the fires in 1940 when the Germans arrived. So this is where you can now see this incredible sculpture here, which is made of bronze, and that plaque that used to stand at the house. Honoré de Balzac est né en cette maison. He was born in this house. Le premier prairial en 7, which turns out to be le 20 mai 1799. Mort à Paris le 20 août 1850. Actually, they crossed it out and wrote the 18th of August, so there was a mistake on the date of his death. So he was in the Touraine. He stopped by, he came here often, from 1850 to, oh no, sorry, I misread that. He was dead. I was going to say that's strange. He was dead in 1850. This is what was done after his death in the Touraine region by Touraine artists between 1850 and 1880. And I hear that Balzac himself loved this first bust here. He didn't think of himself as very handsome, as very good looking, and he thought that was a very flattering depiction of him. And then this is what some of the artists did in Paris during the same time after his death, so let's say in the 30 years that followed his death in 1850. And look at this thing here. So when you visit the château de Saché, you have everything about Balzac, of course, in life in affluent circles in the 19th century, but you also have this incredible building that has been restored to its former glory. And that's the bonus, right? Here's another statue with a reflection. Let's do this. This one is made of terre. Terre cuite, which is like, I don't know how to translate that, terre cuite, like clay, I guess. Now, this entire section with this monumental fireplace here is dedicated to Rodin's work on that infamous statue that it now sits at the Carrefour Vavin in, wait, is it Vavin, Raspail? I forgot the name. Anyway, it's in Montparnasse, right by the cafes, the coupole and so forth. And they really show you, it took 7 years 7 years for Rodin to work on that project, just to be turned down eventually by the people who commissioned it because they didn't like what he did. But here in this room, they explain to you the process he went through. And the part that was interesting to me is that he went to the Touraine, he went to Tours, and he'd heard of a man who was a coach driver who looked like Balzac. So he did a mold of that man's face, and that was his inspiration for what turned out to be Balzac's face eventually. And he did several poses as well. He hesitated for a long time about how Balzac should be dressed. And when you realize how much work and effort Rodin put into this for 7 years, you realize what a big blow it must have been to him when the statue became so controversial and people said there was no likeness to Balzac and it was a disaster. That's pretty much what it looks like, that one in the 14th arrondissement. He even did this one, where he worked, you can tell, on the muscular body of Balzac to give a clear rendition of it. Look at this bench here. And this is the section where they talk about it. Years 1891 to 1898, Le Balzac de Rodin. Balzac by Rodin. These are made of bronze. And what happened was, at the turn of the century and into the 20th century, new descriptions of Balzac, new illustrations, new statues started coming out. This man here, Alexandre Falguière, is the one who was put in charge of doing or creating a new statue after they refused Rodin's, before Rodin's died. So this is kind of what he came up with. But like I said, Rodin's statue has been brought back now to the 14th arrondissement. So next time you walk in front of it, I think seeing all this, you'll have a better appreciation, probably as I will, of all the work and effort that went into it. That's a pretty low door. And this last section here is about how Balzac continues to inspire other artists here now in the 21st century. In fact, these 5 statues can be found in the gardens of the Préfecture in Tours. I've seen them on several occasions, right across from the train station. They are people from Tours that were captured, but they are meant to represent characters, famous characters from Balzac's work. And so the artist, his name is here, is Nicolas Millet. And so you have the name of the 5 characters from Balzac's work, including the famous Père Goriot, who is supposed to be this gentleman. Now remember, these are actual people who live in Tours, but they chose them because they represented those characters well, I guess. And so when you get here, you are back in the gift shop. And let me ask her if she'll let me do it. Excusez-moi, je peux filmer la boutique? Ça vous gêne que je leur montre les jolies choses? Merci, c'est très gentil. So, another very nice boutique with themed gifts and lots and lots and lots of books on Balzac. In fact, you could probably build your Balzac library here. He wrote so many. Some of his books have been turned into excellent movies, like Les Illusions Perdues, Lost Illusions. I saw the movie recently. Excellent movie. Georges Sand, one of his contemporaries. Some nice gifts for the home. Really nice quality things here. And a lot of it, most of it made in France, of course. These socks made in the Touraine, and they have quotes by famous writers like Balzac on them. The brand is La Bonale. And more books. Look at that. Incredible body of work. All of these. And even inspires cartoonists. You can see here. All right, how about a peek at the gardens and then we'll wrap up. Here's the outside of the building. Merci encore, madame. À bientôt. Au revoir. My plan is to come here and live stream outside and in the village of Saché, which is darling, but I am not sure that the cell signal in town is going to provide good quality, so I thought I would do this tour here just for you, just for my patrons, so you get to see the museum anyway. Probably windy in the microphone. So remember, Balzac described what he saw from the windows, what he saw on his morning walks here. The peaceful Touraine. And look at this beautiful building, the château de Saché. Now the gentleman who owned this chateau, I haven't mentioned that yet I think, was a very affluent gentleman who had a house in Tours and a house in Paris and used Saché as a bit of a weekend or vacation home, spent several months a year here. But the story is that this gentleman was actually Balzac's mom's lover for a while. And there was even a rumor that his younger brother might have been this gentleman's son. As it turns out, Balzac really got along well with him and was always welcome here. Look at these grasses, isn't that pretty? I'm just doing this so you can see the building, the chateau. The gardens are big, the grounds are massive, so people come here in the summer. In the evenings, they do special evenings as well. We'll see how the live tour goes. And if it doesn't work out so well, at least you will have seen what everybody comes here to see, which is the Balzac Museum. And here's the glorious Touraine in the winter on a fairly decent day. And here is the château de Saché, or the Balzac Museum as it is known. I'll walk here and then wrap up. I hope you've enjoyed this tour. I'm happy to bring it to you, to thank you for your support. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to find a way of sharing some of the photos as well. If you come to Tours, this is about a 40-minute drive from Tours. Not easy without a car. And there are many chateaux like this one that are smaller, sometimes not as well known, to discover in this beautiful region. Thank you for joining me today. À bientôt, friends.